The sound of the slap echoed through the first-class cabin like a gunshot, silencing the gentle hum of the Boeing 780 Evans engines. Every head turned. Beatrice Galloway, a senior flight attendant with 10 years of perfect service, stood with her hand still raised, her chest heaving with indignation. In the seat below her, wiping a trickle of blood from his lip, sat a young man in a faded hoodie who hadn't said a word. Beatrice thought she had just put an unruly passenger in his place. She didn't know that she had just signed her own professional death warrant. Within seconds, the aircraft would grind to a halt on the tarmac. The pilot's voice would crackle with fear, and Beatrice would realize that the man she just assaulted wasn't just a passenger. He was the one person who could ground the entire fleet. Beatrice Galloway adjusted her silk scarf in the galley mirror, scrutinizing her reflection for any sign of imperfection. There was none. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a severe, immaculate bun. Her red lipstick was applied with surgical precision, and her navy blue uniform was pressed to a razor's edge. She was the picture of aviation authority. Final boarding call for Flight 402 to Zurich. The gate agent's voice boomed over the intercom, muffled by the thick fuselage of the plane. Beatrice sighed, checking her watch. They were 3 minutes behind schedule. She hated delays, almost as much as she hated passengers who didn't understand the unwritten hierarchy of air travel. To Beatrice, the first-class cabin was her personal kingdom, a sanctuary of wealth and quiet dignity that she was sworn to protect from the riffraff of economy. "Sarah," Beatrice snapped at the junior flight attendant, who was struggling with a champagne cork. "Leave that. Check the manifest again. I saw a standby upgrade come through last minute, and I want to make sure they know how to behave." Sarah, a petite brunette with nervous energy, nodded quickly. "Yes, Beatrice. It's seat 1A. The name is Dante Sinclair." Beatrice frowned. "Sinclair doesn't ring a bell. Probably some tech startup lottery winner or a credit card points hoarder." She smoothed her skirt and stepped out into the aisle, ready to greet the elite. Most of the first-class passengers were regulars. There was Mr. Abernathy in 2A, a hedge fund manager who always drank 3 scotches before takeoff. There was Mrs. Vanderwall in 3F, an heiress who travelled with a therapy poodle that smelled better than most humans. Beatrice greeted them with her practiced saccharine smile, helping them stow their Louis Vuitton carry-ons. Then she saw him. Seat 1A was occupied, but not by a suit-wearing executive or a celebrity hiding behind sunglasses. The man in 1A looked like he had just rolled out of bed after a week-long gaming marathon. He wore a charcoal grey hoodie that had seen better days, loose-fitting basketball shorts, and scuffed sneakers. Over his ears were massive, noise-cancelling headphones, and his eyes were closed, his head resting against the window. Beatrice's smile vanished instantly. Her blood pressure spiked. It was an insult, a visual stain on her pristine cabin. She marched over, her heels clicking aggressively on the carpet. She tapped the man on the shoulder, perhaps a little harder than necessary. The man didn't move. Beatrice tapped again, harder this time. "Sir." The man's eyes opened. They were dark, calm, and flecked with gold, but currently they looked weary. He slid the headphones down to his neck. "Yeah? We taking off?" His voice was deep, relaxed, lacking the deference Beatrice felt she was owed. "Ticket," Beatrice demanded, extending her hand palm up. She didn't add a please. The man, Dante, blinked slowly. "I already scanned it at the gate. I'm good." "Sir, this is first class," Beatrice said, her voice raising just enough to draw the attention of Mr. Abernathy across the aisle. "Economy boarding is through the second door, past the galley. You are holding up my service." Dante sighed, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a crumpled boarding pass and handed it to her. Beatrice snatched it, ready to expose him. She scanned the paper, her eyes narrowing. Sinclair, Dante. Seat 1A, first class. Priority. It was real, but Beatrice's mind couldn't accept it. It had to be a system glitch, or he had stolen it, or he had swapped passes with someone. A man dressed like this, looking like that, did not sit in 1A. Not on her plane, not on her watch. "This is a mistake," she declared, crumpling the pass slightly in her grip. "It's not a mistake," Dante said, reaching for the pass back. "I bought the ticket. Now, can I get some water?" "You bought the ticket?" Beatrice let out a short, incredulous laugh. "A last-minute international first-class ticket costs $12,000. Are you telling me you have $12,000? Dante looked at her, his expression hardening slightly. "Does it matter? The ticket says 1A. I'm in 1A. "I think you're confused," Beatrice said, stepping closer, looming over him. She lowered her voice to a harsh whisper. "I know how this works. You found a loophole, or you're using a stolen employee pass. But I'm not going to let you ruin the atmosphere for my paying customers. Grab your bag and move to row 45. There are plenty of middle seats open." Dante put his headphones back on. "Go check your computer, lady. I'm not moving." The disrespect shattered Beatrice's composure. She was the queen of the cabin. No one ignored her. She reached out and yanked the headphones off his head. "Hey!" Dante snapped, sitting up straight, his hand instinctively coming up to protect his property. "Don't you dare raise your voice at me!" Beatrice shrieked. The cabin went silent. Mrs. Vanderwall gasped. "You touched me first," Dante said, his voice dropping to a dangerous low. "Give me my headphones and walk away." "I am the authority on this aircraft," Beatrice yelled, her face flushing red. "You are a fraud, and you are trespassing. Get up now, or I will have security drag you off." Dante looked at her, a strange mix of pity and amusement in his eyes. "You really don't want to do this? Is that a threat?" Beatrice's eyes went wide. She turned to the rest of the cabin. "Did you hear that? He threatened me. He's a danger to the flight." She turned back to Dante, adrenaline flooding her veins. She felt righteous. She felt powerful. She was protecting her passengers from a thug. Dante stood up. He was tall, much taller than he looked, sitting down, towering over Beatrice. "I'm going to speak to the pilot." "You aren't going anywhere near the cockpit," Beatrice screamed. In a moment of pure, unfiltered panic and prejudice, Beatrice reacted. As Dante tried to step past her into the aisle, she swung her hand. Smack! The slap connected with his cheek with a wet, sharp crack. Dante's head whipped to the side. He stumbled back into his seat, catching himself on the armrest. He touched his lip, checking for blood. He looked at his fingers, then back at Beatrice. He didn't yell. He didn't strike back. He just stared at her with an intensity that made the air in the cabin drop 10 degrees. Beatrice stood there, chest heaving, hand stinging. For a second, she felt triumphant. She had stopped the threat. Then, the silence hit her. No one was cheering. Mr. Abernathy was staring at her with his mouth open. Sarah, the junior attendant, was frozen in the galley doorway, her hands covering her mouth in horror. Dante slowly sat back down. He picked up his phone. He didn't dial 911. He didn't record her. He typed a single text message, hit send, and then looked out the window. "Sit down," Beatrice hissed, though her voice wavered slightly now. "We are taking off." She turned on her heel and marched back to the galley, her heart hammering against her ribs. She needed a moment. She needed to compose herself. She told herself she did the right thing. He was aggressive. He was threatening. She was defending the flight. The plane began to push back from the gate. The engines whined as they spooled up. Beatrice took her jump seat, strapping herself in. She closed her eyes, forcing her breathing to slow. It's over, she thought. We'll land in Zurich. Police will meet us there, and he'll be gone. The plane taxied toward the runway. The safety video began to play on the screens. Then, abruptly, the motion stopped. The plane didn't just slow down. It braked hard, shuddering to a halt in the middle of the tarmac. The engines didn't roar for takeoff. Instead, they spooled down to a low, idle whine. Beatrice frowned. Traffic? The intercom clicked. It was Captain Miller. His voice, usually the smooth baritone of confidence, sounded thin and strained. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain speaking. We have been ordered by the tower to hold our position immediately. We have been denied clearance for takeoff. Please remain in your seats. Beatrice unbuckled her belt. Delays were one thing, but a hard stop on the tarmac after pushback was rare. She stood up to check on the passengers. As she stepped into the first-class aisle, she saw Dante Sinclair. He wasn't looking out the window anymore. He was looking right at her. And for the first time, Beatrice noticed the watch on his wrist. It wasn't a cheap digital tracker. It was a Patek Philippe Nautilus, platinum, worth more than her house. The phone in the galley rang. It was the cockpit. Beatrice answered it. Beatrice, Captain Miller's voice was shaking. What is going on back there? Nothing, Captain, she lied smoothly. Just a disruptive passenger in 1A. I handled it. Why are we stopped? Handled it? Miller whispered, his voice laced with panic. Beatrice, ground control didn't just stop us. The order came from the corporate headquarters in Chicago. They shut down the entire flight plan. They said there is a Class A security violation involving a member of the board. Beatrice's stomach dropped. The board? We don't have any board members on board, just the usuals. Beatrice, Miller said, and she could hear the fear choking him. They asked for the passenger in 1A by name. They asked if he was safe. Beatrice, who is in 1A? Beatrice looked down the aisle. Dante Sinclair was calmly scrolling on his phone. He looked up, met her eyes, and gave a small, cold smile. His name is Dante Sinclair, Beatrice whispered into the phone. There was a long silence on the other end. Oh, God, Miller breathed. Beatrice, that's not just a passenger. That's the chairman's son. His father bought the airline 3 days ago. The blood drained from Beatrice's face so fast she felt dizzy. The phone slipped from her sweaty grip and dangled by its cord, swaying back and forth like a pendulum, counting down the seconds of her career. The phone cord swayed gently, a metronome ticking away the final seconds of Beatrice Galloway's career, though she refused to hear it. The captain's words, the chairman's son, bounced around her skull like a trapped bird. But her mind, honed by years of enforcing rules and looking down on those who broke them, rejected the reality. Impossible, she thought, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Look at him. She peered around the galley partition. Dante Sinclair was still sitting there. He hadn't demanded to see a lawyer. He hadn't started screaming, "Do you know who I am?" like the usual entitled brats she dealt with. He was simply adjusting the volume on his phone, looking bored. It was a trick. It had to be. Captain Miller was old. Maybe he was senile. Maybe this Dante had hacked the manifest. People did that now, didn't they? Cyber-terrorism. That was it. He was a cyber-terrorist trying to ground the plane. Beatrice straightened her spine. The panic receded, replaced by a cold, delusional resolve. If he was a threat, she was the hero. If he was a fraud, she was the whistleblower. And if, by some microscopic chance, he was the owner's son, well, she would simply explain that he had failed to identify himself properly. Protocol was protocol. Even billionaires had to follow the rules. "Ladies and gentlemen," Captain Miller's voice returned to the PA system, sounding hollow and defeated. "We are returning to the gate. We have a security situation that needs to be resolved on the ground. We apologize for the inconvenience." A collective groan rippled through the first-class cabin. "This is ridiculous!" Mr. Abernathy barked, slamming his scotch glass down on the tray table. "I have a meeting in Zurich in 9 hours. Who is responsible for this?" Beatrice seized the moment. She stepped into the aisle, her face arranged into a mask of tragic duty. "I am so sorry, Mr. Abernathy," she said, her voice trembling, just enough to sound like a shaken victim. She gestured subtly towards seat 1A. "Unfortunately, we have a passenger who refused to follow federal safety regulations and became physically aggressive with the flight crew. For your safety, the captain decided we cannot fly with him on board." Head snapped toward Dante. Mrs. Vanderwall clutched her poodle tighter. "Him? The young man in the hoodie?" "Appearances can be deceiving," Beatrice whispered, conspiratorially, leaning in. "He threatened me. I tried to de-escalate, but he lunged. I'm just thankful security is meeting us at the gate." Dante didn't look up. He didn't defend himself. He just kept scrolling, his thumb moving rhythmically over the screen. His silence infuriated Beatrice. It felt like he was laughing at her. "Sarah," Beatrice hissed, cornering the junior flight attendant in the galley as the plane lurched into a turn, heading back to the terminal. Sarah was pale, her hands shaking as she stowed a bottle of wine. "Beatrice, did you really slap him?" "I heard a noise." "You heard nothing," Beatrice snapped, grabbing Sarah's wrist. Her nails dug into the younger woman's skin. "Listen to me closely. This man is dangerous. He provoked me. He raised his hand and I acted in self-defense. That is what happened. If you say anything else, you're contradicting a senior crew member during a security crisis. Do you know what happens to probationers who do that? They never fly again." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She looked at seat 1A, then back at Beatrice's furious, desperate face. I understand." "Good." Beatrice released her. "Now, go check on Mrs. Vanderwall. Offer her another warm towel. Make sure everyone knows he is the reason we aren't in the air." The plane taxied agonizingly slowly. Outside the window, the ground crew watched them pass with confused expressions. A return to gate after pushback was a logistical nightmare. It cost thousands of dollars in fuel and fines. Beatrice watched the terminal building get closer, feeling a knot of dread tighten in her stomach despite her bravado. As they approached Gate B12, Beatrice saw the flashing lights. It wasn't just one police cruiser. Through the small porthole window in the galley door, she saw a convoy, 3 airport police SUVs, a black tactical van, and 2 sleek black sedans with tinted windows that looked completely out of place on the tarmac. "That seems excessive," Sarah whispered, peeking over Beatrice's shoulder. "Standard procedure for a violent passenger," Beatrice lied, though her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "They take assaults on crew members very seriously post 9/11. The aircraft shuddered to a halt, the fasten seatbelt sign pinged off. Usually, this was the moment passengers jumped up to grab their bags, but nobody moved. The atmosphere in the cabin was heavy, thick with tension. Captain Miller emerged from the cockpit. He didn't look at Beatrice. He looked at the floor. He was sweating profusely. "Open the door, Beatrice," Miller said softly. "Shouldn't we wait for the stairs?" she asked. "The jet bridge is connected," Miller said, his voice flat. "Open it." Beatrice took a deep breath. This was her stage. She smoothed her skirt, checked her hair, and assumed the position of the grieving, brave victim. She would cry just a little, a single, elegant tear. She would point at Dante. The police would drag him off. And then she would serve champagne. She grabbed the heavy handle of the 1L door, rotated it up, and pushed. The door swung outward, locking into place against the fuselage. Beatrice stepped back, composing her face, ready to greet a TSA agent or a beat cop. Instead, a man in a bespoke Italian suit stepped onto the plane. He didn't look like police. He looked like money. Serious, old, dangerous money. He was older, with silver hair and eyes that looked like chips of flint. He was followed immediately by two men who were clearly private security, bulky earpieces, suits that struggled to contain their shoulders. Beatrice faltered. "Sir, I—" The man in the suit walked right past her. He didn't even blink. It was as if she were a piece of the galley equipment, invisible and irrelevant. He walked straight into the first-class cabin and stopped at row 1. The entire cabin held its breath. Beatrice watched, confused. Why aren't they cuffing him? The man in the suit bowed. It wasn't a nod. It was a formal, respectful bow. "Mr. Sinclair," the man said, his voice smooth and cultured. "I am Leonard Graves, Chief of Risk Management for the Sinclair Group. Your father sent me. We are deeply mortified by the interruption." Dante finally looked up. He pulled his headphones down around his neck. He looked at Graves, then he looked at Beatrice. "Took you long enough, Leo," Dante said. The silence in the cabin was absolute. It was a vacuum that sucked the air out of Beatrice's lungs. Mr. Abernathy's jaw had actually dropped. Mrs. Vanderwall had lowered her sunglasses to peer over the rim. Beatrice felt the world tilting. Chief of Risk Management, the Sinclair Group. No, this couldn't be happening. She had to salvage this. She was the senior purser. She was the victim. She rushed forward, stepping between Graves and Dante. "Sir, excuse me, sir." Beatrice's voice was shrill, cracking with desperation. "I don't know who you are, but you cannot speak to this passenger. He is in police custody. He assaulted a flight attendant." Leonard Graves slowly turned his head. He looked at Beatrice for the first time. His expression wasn't angry. It was something far worse. It was clinically detached, like a scientist looking at a bacteria sample that needed to be bleached. "Assaulted?" Graves repeated the word quietly. "Yes." Beatrice pointed a shaking finger at Dante. "He refused a direct order. He was belligerent. He lunged at me. I had to defend myself." Graves looked back at Dante. "Did you lunge, sir?" Dante let out a short, dry chuckle. "I asked for water. She tried to snatch my headphones, then she slapped me." He pointed to his lip, where a small cut was now visible, a tiny red line against his skin. "I think there's a camera right there." Dante pointed up. Above the bulkhead, a small security dome camera blinked silently. Beatrice froze. She had forgotten the new cabin retrofit. The 787s had cameras in the galley entryways now. Graves looked at the camera, then back at Beatrice. "Miss Galloway, is it?" He glanced at her name tag without moving his eyes from her face. "Yes. Beatrice Galloway. I have been with this airline for 10 years. I have a perfect record." She was pleading now, her authority crumbling into dust. 10 years, Graves mused. That's a long time to build a career just to end it in 3 seconds. I was doing my job," Beatrice insisted, but she backed away as one of the massive security guards stepped onto the plane. "Your job," Graves said, his voice dropping to an icy chill, "is to ensure the safety and comfort of our passengers, not to profile them, not to assault them." "He didn't look like a first-class passenger," Beatrice blurted out. The words left her mouth before she could stop them, the ugly truth spilling onto the carpet. "Ah," Graves said. "There it is." He turned to the captain, who was hovering in the cockpit doorway, looking like a man awaiting a firing squad. "Captain Miller," Graves said. "Yes, sir," Miller squeaked. "Did you authorize the physical restraint of this passenger?" "No, sir. Absolutely not, sir," Miller said quickly, throwing Beatrice under the bus with zero hesitation. "I had no idea anything physical had occurred until ground control called me. Beatrice told me she handled a disruptive passenger." "Liar!" Beatrice screamed, spinning on the captain. "You know how these people are. You know we have to be careful." "These people?" Dante spoke up from his seat. His voice was calm, carrying effortlessly through the cabin. "You mean paying customers? Or do you mean black men wearing hoodies?" Beatrice opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She looked around the cabin for support. Surely Mr. Abernathy understood. Surely Mrs. Vanderwall knew what it was like to feel threatened by someone who didn't belong. But Mr. Abernathy was studiously looking out the window. Mrs. Vanderwall was pretending to feed her dog. Nobody wanted to be associated with her now. She was radioactive. "Miss Galloway," Graves said, stepping aside. "You are relieved of duty, effective immediately." "You can't do that," Beatrice stammered. "I have a union. I have rights. You can't just fire me on the tarmac." "I'm not firing you," Graves said softly. "The airline isn't firing you yet. That will happen after the internal review tomorrow morning." He gestured to the two large security guards. "However, the Federal Aviation Administration has strict rules about crew members assaulting passengers. It is a federal crime. These gentlemen aren't airport security. They are private contractors authorized to escort you to the airport police, who are waiting at the bottom of the jet bridge to charge you with assault and battery." "Police?" Beatrice's knees buckled. "For me?" "You slapped a passenger," Graves said. "That is assault. The fact that the passenger owns the plane you are standing on is just bad luck." One of the large guards stepped forward and took Beatrice by the arm. It wasn't a gentle grip. It was firm, controlling. "Get your hands off me!" Beatrice shrieked, the veneer of the perfect flight attendant completely shattering. She thrashed, a bun coming loose, strands of blonde hair falling over her face. "I am the victim here. He provoked me. He's a thug." "Get her off my plane," Dante said. He didn't shout. He just said it, tiredly. The guard pulled. Beatrice stumbled forward. She looked at Sarah in the galley. "Sarah, tell them he lunged." Sarah looked at the floor, tears streaming down her face, and shook her head. "I'm sorry, Beatrice. I didn't see him move." Beatrice let out a howl of rage as she was half dragged, half escorted off the plane. The sound of her heels dragging on the jet bridge metal echoed back into the cabin even after she disappeared from view. Silence returned to first class. Graves adjusted his cuffs and turned back to Dante. "Sir, we have a replacement crew en route. They will be here in 20 minutes. Or, if you prefer, we can deplane everyone and have the private jet readied. It will take an hour." Dante looked around the cabin. He saw the fear and curiosity in the eyes of the other passengers. He saw the terrified junior flight attendant, Sarah, trembling in the corner. "No," Dante said. "We're already here. Let's fly commercial." "But Leo?" "Yes, sir?" "I want the name of everyone working the gate today," Dante said, his voice hardening. "She didn't get this attitude from nowhere. Someone let me on this plane thinking I was a joke. I want to know who checked my ticket and rolled their eyes." "Consider it done," Graves said. He bowed again. "Have a safe flight to Zurich, Mr. Sinclair." Graves turned and exited the plane. Dante sighed and put his headphones back on. He looked across the aisle. Mr. Abernathy was staring at him. "What?" Dante asked. "Nothing," Mr. Abernathy squeaked. "Nothing at all. Nice watch." Dante didn't smile. He just closed his eyes. The drama was over, but the lesson was just beginning. Beatrice was gone. But the rot in the airline went deeper than one flight attendant, and Dante Sinclair had a long flight ahead of him to decide exactly how much of it he was going to cut out. But as the new crew rushed onto the plane, looking terrified and overly polite, Dante realized something. The slap didn't hurt anymore. What hurt was the look in Beatrice's eyes, the absolute certainty that she was right. He pulled out his phone and opened a new text message to his father. Landed back at gate. Situation handled. But we need to talk about HR policies when I get back. It's worse than you think. He hit send as the plane began to push back for the second time. The cruising altitude was 38,000 feet, but the atmosphere inside the Boeing 787 felt heavier than the bottom of the ocean. For the first time in the airline's history, the first-class cabin was dead silent. There was no clinking of silverware, no polite chatter about the stock market, no demands for more pillows. The passengers were terrified of making a sound, lest they draw the attention of the man in seat 1A. Dante Sinclair hadn't moved for 3 hours. He sat reclined, the hood of his sweatshirt pulled up, his eyes fixed on the flight map on the screen in front of him. He wasn't sleeping. He was thinking. In the galley, Sarah, the junior flight attendant, was hyperventilating. She clutched a silver coffee pot with trembling hands. "You have to go out there," Captain Miller whispered harshly. He had come out of the cockpit ostensibly to use the restroom, but really to check on the situation. His face was grey, the colour of wet ash. "Ask him if he needs anything. We need to show hospitality." "I can't," Sarah squeaked. "He hasn't looked at anyone since we took off. What if he fires me?" "I have student loans, Captain." "He won't fire you," Miller said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "You didn't slap him, just go. Pour the coffee. Smile." Sarah took a deep breath, smoothed her uniform, and stepped into the aisle. She felt like she was walking the plank. She approached seat 1A. Mr. Sinclair?" Dante turned his head slowly. The red mark on his lip had swelled slightly. It looked angry against his skin. "Yeah? Would you like some Blue Mountain coffee? Or perhaps something from the reserve wine list?" Sarah's voice wavered so badly, she sounded like she was vibrating. Dante looked at the coffee pot, then up at her terrified eyes. He saw the genuine fear there. Not respect. Fear. She was afraid he would destroy her life with a snap of his fingers, just like he had done to Beatrice. His expression softened, just a fraction. "What's your name again?" he asked. "Sarah, sir. Sarah Jenkins." "Sarah," Dante said quietly. "Relax. I'm not the Grim Reaper. I'm just a guy who wanted to go to Zurich." "I know, sir. I'm so sorry about earlier. Beatrice, she can be intense." "Intense is a polite word for it," Dante said. "Did you know she was going to do it?" Sarah froze. This was the test. I knew she was angry. She hates it when people don't follow her specific routine. But I've never seen her hit anyone, I swear." Dante studied her face for a long moment, looking for the lie. He didn't find one. "Okay, I believe you. Just coffee, Sarah. Black. And bring me the passenger manifest." "The manifest, sir?" "The list of everyone on this plane," Dante said calmly. "I need to know who I'm flying with." Sarah nodded frantically and rushed back to the galley. Across the aisle, Mr. Abernathy cleared his throat. He had been waiting for an opening. He adjusted his silk tie and leaned across the aisle, a smile plastered on his face that looked painful. "Terrible business, that," Abernathy said, his voice booming with false camaraderie. "I must say, you handled it with remarkable restraint, Mr. Sinclair. Remarkable. Most men would have retaliated." Dante didn't turn his body. He just shifted his eyes. And what did you do, Mr. Abernathy? Global Equities, he said, extending a hand that Dante ignored. Well, I was quite shocked, naturally. I was just about to intervene when your security team arrived. I was preparing to give that stewardess a piece of my mind. Dante laughed. It was a cold, dry sound. Intervene? You were staring out of the window hoping she didn't yell at you next. You watched a woman assault a passenger because you assumed the passenger was in the wrong. Don't rewrite history just because you found out I signed the checks. Abernathy's smile faltered. He pulled his hand back as if he'd touched a hot stove. I assure you, I hold no prejudices. Everyone holds prejudices, Mr. Abernathy, Dante said, turning back to his screen. The smart ones just admit it. Drink your scotch. The rest of the flight passed in a blur of uncomfortable silence. But while the plane cut through the night sky over the Atlantic, a different kind of storm was brewing on the ground. 4,000 miles away, in a holding cell at O'Hare International Airport, Beatrice Galloway was pacing. They had taken her phone. They had taken her belt and her shoelaces. She was still in her navy blue uniform, but it was wrinkled now, the scarf askew. She banged on the metal door. I need my phone call. I know my rights. I need to call the union. A heavy-set officer opened the slot in the door. You already called your lawyer, lady. Sit down. My lawyer didn't answer, Beatrice screamed. I need to call Linda at the Flight Attendants Alliance. She'll fix this. You people have no idea who you're dealing with. I am a victim of workplace violence. The officer laughed. Workplace violence? We saw the security footage from the gate, lady. You slapped a guy sitting down. That's battery. And since you were in a metal tube crossing state lines, the feds are looking at interference with a flight crew, which ironically is you interfering with yourself. He provoked me, Beatrice insisted, tears of rage stinging her eyes. He was threatening the safety of the flight. Yeah, we heard, the officer said, closing the slot. The FBI is on their way. Save it for them. Beatrice sank onto the cold metal bench. She didn't understand. Why wasn't the system working? She followed the rules. She protected the first-class cabin. Why was she the one in a cage? The landing in Zurich was smooth, a testament to Captain Miller's desperate desire to please his new boss. As the plane taxied to the gate, the Swiss ground crew was already waiting, but they weren't alone. Dante looked out the window and saw a sea of flashing cameras beyond the glass walls of the terminal. Sir, Sarah said, her voice trembling again as she stood by his seat. The captain received a message from the tower. The paparazzi are here. Apparently there's a video. Dante frowned. A video? He pulled his phone out of his pocket and turned off airplane mode. Instantly, the device nearly vibrated out of his hand. Hundreds of notifications, missed calls, emails. He opened Twitter. The #1 trending topic in the world wasn't politics or sports. It was the slap. He tapped the hashtag. The top post was a video, shaky but clear, filmed from row 2 of first class. It showed everything. Beatrice looming over him. Beatrice screaming. Beatrice winding up and slapping him. And then, the most damning part, Dante sitting there, calm, taking it, while Beatrice looked around with a smug sense of satisfaction. The caption read, United Airlines FA assaults black passenger for sitting in first class. Turns out he owns the airline. Karma loading. 98%. The video had 40 million views. It had been posted 6 hours ago. Who filmed it? Dante muttered. I think it was the teenager in 2F, Sarah whispered. The one with the headphones. Dante stood up. Let's get this over with. The jet bridge connected. This time there was no waiting. The door opened, and a team of Swiss security guards in grey suits formed a phalanx. Mr. Sinclair, the lead guard said in a thick German accent. "We have a secure route to the vehicle. Please follow us. Do not speak to the press." Dante grabbed his backpack. He walked past the cockpit. Captain Miller was standing there, looking hopeful. "Mr. Sinclair," Miller said, forcing a smile. "I hope the rest of the flight was comfortable. I want you to know that I am writing a full report on Beatrice's behavior. I had no idea she was capable of—" Dante didn't stop walking. He didn't even look at Miller. "Save the report, Captain. You're retired." Miller's face went white. "Sir?" "You lied to my risk manager," Dante said, pausing at the door. "You said you didn't know anything physical happened. But you're the captain. If you didn't know your lead flight attendant was assaulting passengers, you're incompetent. If you did know and lied to protect her, you're complicit. Either way, you don't fly my planes." Dante stepped onto the jet bridge, leaving the captain staring into the abyss of a pensionless future. The walk through the terminal was a gauntlet. Even with the VIP route, they had to pass through a glass corridor visible to the public. The moment Dante appeared, the flashes erupted, like lightning storms. Reporters were shouting through the glass. "Mr. Sinclair, did you provoke her? Is it true you're suing the union? Do you hate flight attendants?" Dante ignored them all. He climbed into the back of a waiting Mercedes S-Class. Leonard Graves was already inside, waiting with a tablet and a bottle of water. "Welcome to Zurich," Graves said dryly. "You're famous." "I see that," Dante said, slumping into the leather seat. "How bad is the stock?" "Down 12% in pre-market trading," Graves said. "Investors don't like it when the chairman's son gets assaulted by staff. It suggests a lack of discipline in the ranks. Your father is displeased." "With me?" "With the narrative," Graves said. "He wants you to issue a statement. Something conciliatory. Misunderstanding. Rogue employee. He wants to stop the bleeding." Dante looked out the window at the grey Swiss sky. "No." Graves paused. "No. If I say it was a misunderstanding, she wins. She gets to go on TV and cry about how hard her job is and how I didn't listen. And next week, she does it to someone else who doesn't have my last name." "So what is the plan?" Graves asked. "The plan is to let her talk," Dante said. "Is she still in custody?" "She made bail an hour ago," Graves said, tapping his tablet. "And you predicted correctly. She has already booked an interview with the Morning Truth in New York. It airs tomorrow morning. Her lawyer is positioning her as a safety whistleblower who was intimidated by a suspicious passenger." Dante smiled. It was the first time he had smiled since he got on the plane. It was a terrifying smile. "Perfect," Dante said. "Let her dig the hole. Let her lie to the world. And while she's doing that, I want you to pull her entire history. Every complaint, every disciplinary note, every time she was rude to a passenger and got away with it because she was senior. I want it all." "That's a lot of paperwork, Dante," Graves warned. "And the union will fight the release of personnel records." "We own the airline, Leo," Dante said, closing his eyes. "I don't need to release them to the press. I just need to know where the bodies are buried. Because when she goes on TV and lies, I'm going to need ammunition for the truth." Dante's phone buzzed. It was a text from his father, Arthur Sinclair. "Stop the bleeding. Fix this. Now." Dante typed back. "I'm not patching the wound, Dad. I'm cutting out the infection." The car sped off toward the hotel, but the war was just beginning. Beatrice Galloway thought she was fighting for her job. She didn't realize that she was fighting for her existence. And she had just made the fatal mistake of doubling down against a man who had the money to buy the network she was about to speak on. 3 days later, the exclusive interview banner flashed across millions of television screens in America. Beatrice Galloway sat on the plush beige couch of the Morning Truth, the country's highest-rated morning show. She had been prepped by a crisis PR team funded by the Flight Attendants Union, though they were already growing nervous about the investment. Beatrice, however, looked the part of the martyr perfectly. She wore a soft pastel cardigan instead of her sharp uniform. Her hair was down, loose and wavy, softening her angular features. She wore minimal makeup to highlight the dark circles under her eyes, circles that were genuine, born from 3 nights of reading hate mail on Twitter. "It was terrifying, Diane," Beatrice said, her voice breaking just enough to tug at the heartstrings of the studio audience. She clutched a tissue in her hand. "You have to understand the environment we work in. We are locked in a metal tube at 30,000 feet. When a passenger, a large man, refuses to follow instructions, when he becomes aggressive, my training kicks in. I didn't see a billionaire's son. I saw a threat to the safety of my 200 passengers." Diane, the host, nodded sympathetically. "And you maintain that he lunged at you? That the slap was a reflex?" "Absolutely," Beatrice lied. She had told the lie so many times in the last 72 hours that she had started to believe it herself. He stood up suddenly. He invaded my personal space. I put my hand up to protect myself and contact was made. It wasn't malicious. It was fear. And now I've lost my pension. I've been painted as a racist. It's destroying my life." She dabbed at a dry tear. The audience murmured in support. 4,000 miles away in Zurich, Dante Sinclair sat in a darkened hotel suite, watching the live stream on a tablet. The glow of the screen illuminated his face, which was hard as stone. Leonard Graves stood behind him, phone in hand. "She's good," Graves admitted. "She's polling well with the older demographic. They think you're an entitled millennial who bullied a working-class woman." "Is it ready?" Dante asked. "The legal team just filed the papers in New York," Graves said. "And the technical team has finished scrubbing the audio. We sent the file to the network's control room 2 minutes ago." Dante watched the screen. "Pull the trigger." On the TV, Diane was leaning in to ask Beatrice another softball question. "So Beatrice, if you could say one thing to Dante Sinclair right now, what would it be?" Beatrice looked directly into the camera, her eyes shimmering with practiced sincerity. "I would say, I forgive you. I forgive you for using your power to crush a little person. And I hope you learn that money can't buy respect." "That is beautiful," Diane said. "Truly to—" Suddenly, Diane stopped. She pressed her hand to her earpiece. Her expression shifted from sympathy to confusion, and then to shock. I'm sorry," Diane stammered. "I'm being told we have breaking news regarding this story. The Sinclair Group has just released unedited security footage from the aircraft." Beatrice's face went rigid. "Footage?" she whispered. "There is no footage. The cameras don't record audio." "Apparently," Diane said, looking at the teleprompter with widening eyes. "The new 787 Dreamliners were retrofitted with high-definition audio-visual security systems in the galley 2 months ago. We have the clip." Beatrice started to stand up. "I think we're done here. Sit down, Beatrice," Diane said, her voice losing all its warmth. "We need to watch this." The giant screen behind them flickered to life. The timestamp showed the date of the flight. The angle was high and clear, looking down from the galley ceiling. The world watched as Dante sat in seat 1A, reading his ticket. They saw Beatrice march over. They heard the audio, crystal clear. "You found a loophole, or you're using a stolen employee pass. Grab your bag and move to row 45. The audience gasped. The venom in her voice was undeniable. Then, the confrontation. The video clearly showed Dante sitting down. He stood up only when she grabbed his headphones. He didn't lunge. He didn't raise a fist. He stood there, hands open, palms showing. "I'm going to speak to the pilot. You aren't going anywhere near the cockpit." And then the slap. It wasn't a defensive flail. It was a wind-up and a strike. Vicious, deliberate. The clip ended. The studio was dead silent. Beatrice sat frozen, her face draining of color until she looked like a wax figure. Diane turned to her. "That didn't look like a lunge, Beatrice. That looked like you assaulted a passenger because you didn't think he belonged in first class." "It's doctored!" Beatrice shrieked, her voice cracking. "That's a deepfake. AI. They used AI to fake it." "Beatrice," Diane said, cutting her off, "we also have a statement from the Airline Pilots Association. Captain Miller has recanted his statement. He admits he lied to cover for you. And, oh my," Diane touched her earpiece again, "we have one more update. A process server is walking onto the set." Beatrice's eyes bulged. "What?" From the side of the stage, a man in a cheap suit walked right into the live shot. Security didn't stop him. The network producers, smelling ratings gold, had let him through. He walked up to the beige couch and dropped a thick stack of documents into Beatrice's lap. "Beatrice Galloway?" the man said, his voice picked up by her clip-on microphone. "You are hereby served. The Sinclair Group is suing you for defamation, breach of contract, and civil battery. They are also suing for the 14% drop in stock value attributed to your false public statements." "Suing me?" Beatrice whispered, staring at the papers. "I don't have any money. The lawsuit seeks $120 million in damages," the man said, turning to leave. "Good luck." The camera zoomed in on Beatrice's face. The mask was gone. The martyr was gone. All that was left was a bully who had been caught, stripped naked before the world, and handed a bill she could never pay. In Zurich, Dante turned off the tablet. "Do we really want $120 million from her?" Graves asked. "She doesn't have $120. "No," Dante said, standing up and stretching. "But I want her to spend the rest of her life knowing that she can't just lie her way out of hurting people. Drop the suit in a year. Bankrupt her first." 6 months had passed since the incident on Flight 402. The news cycle, as it always does, had moved on. The world was outraged about a new scandal, a new celebrity breakup, a new war. But for Beatrice Galloway, time had frozen the moment the process server dropped those papers in her lap. She sat in the break room of a Burger King on the outskirts of Chicago, staring at her reflection in the stainless steel napkin dispenser. The polyester uniform was uncomfortable, scratching at her neck. It was 2 sizes too big. "B, you're on fries!" The manager, a 19-year-old named Kyle, shouted from the front. "Coming, Kyle," Beatrice muttered. Her life had dismantled itself with terrifying speed. The union had dropped her defense the moment the video aired, citing a zero-tolerance policy for dishonesty. The airline had fired her with cause, meaning no severance, no benefits, and a black mark on her record that made her untouchable in the aviation industry. Then came the civil judgments. She hadn't paid the $120 million, of course. Dante had eventually withdrawn the massive corporate suit as promised, but not before her legal fees bankrupted her. She had lost her condo. She had sold her car. She was renting a room in a basement apartment that smelled of mildew, taking the bus to a job where she served the very people she used to look down on. She walked out to the fry station, dropping a basket of frozen potatoes into the boiling oil. The grease splattered onto her wrist. She winced, but didn't complain. A customer was waiting at the counter. He was a young black man in a hoodie, headphones around his neck. Beatrice froze. Her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. For a second, She thought it was him. The man looked up. "Excuse me, can I get some extra ketchup?" It wasn't Dante, just a regular guy. "Yes," Beatrice whispered, keeping her head down. "Yes, sir." Right away. She handed him the packets with 2 hands, trembling. He took them without looking at her, and walked away. She wasn't the queen of the cabin anymore. She was just another person trying to survive, forced to learn the humility she had never possessed. Meanwhile, at 35,000 feet, the atmosphere on Sinclair Airways had changed. Dante Sinclair sat in seat 1A of the flagship flight from New York to Tokyo. He wasn't wearing a hoodie this time. He was wearing a suit, not because he had to, but because he was now the chairman of the board. He looked over the rim of his champagne glass. The cabin crew was diverse, young, and energetic. They moved with efficiency, but the stiffness was gone. A young flight attendant, a man named Marcus with dreadlocks neatly tied back, was serving an elderly woman in 2B. The woman was confused about the entertainment system. "It's okay, Mum," Marcus said, kneeling so he was at eye level with her, a new policy Dante had implemented. Never look down on the passenger. "Let me show you. We have all the classics." Dante watched as Marcus patiently guided her through the menu, smiling genuinely. "Mr. Sinclair?" Dante turned. Leonard Graves was sitting across the aisle in 1F. "The quarterly report is in," Graves said. "Customer satisfaction is up 40%. Incident reports involving bias are down 90%. And the stock? Well, the stock is at an all-time high." Dante nodded, looking out the window at the clouds stretching to the horizon. "And Beatrice?" Graves hesitated. "She's working fast food in Chicago. She declared bankruptcy last month. She's barely scraping by." Dante took a sip of his drink. He didn't feel joy at the news. He didn't feel triumph. He just felt balance. "Let her be," Dante said. "She's grounded. We're flying." He tapped the screen on his armrest. He didn't turn on a movie. He opened the internal crew channel. "This is Dante Sinclair," he said into the small microphone, his voice echoing in the galleys of the plane where the crew was working. "I just want to say, great work today. Keep looking out for each other. And remember, everyone who steps on this plane is a guest. Treat them like royalty, and they'll treat you like family. Sinclair out." He sat back, closing his eyes. The plane banked smoothly to the left, chasing the sun. The engines hummed a steady, powerful song. The turbulence was behind them. That is the story of how one moment of arrogance can ground a life forever. Beatrice thought her uniform gave her the right to judge, but she learned the hard way that true power doesn't need to shout. It sits quietly, observes, and when necessary, strikes back with the weight of truth. Dante Sinclair didn't just win a lawsuit, he changed a culture. If you enjoyed this story of instant karma and justice, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that you should never judge a book by its cover. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.